Hello, welcome to the self-learning platform by Dr. Sushma Singh. Today we start Unit 7, Hindutva, V.D. Savarkar and M.S. Golwalkar. And today we will discuss Hindu nationalism of M.S. Golwalkar. The Hindu nationalism of M.S. Golwalkar was different from that of V.D. Savarkar in the sense that Golwalkar's theory of nationalism was based on Indian spiritualism. Savarkar was a modernist and he did not oppose westernization, but Golwalkar was a supporter of Hindu culture and opposed the Western way of life. He held that Indian spiritualism was superior to the Western modernism. He believed that India was a holy land and it was the divine will that India should lead the world. Now, the point is nation as motherland. Golwalkar was an exponent of cultural nationalism and he identified nationalism with love for our motherland. He held that the Hindus considered India as their motherland because since thousands of years they had been identified with this holy land. In this holy land only, Hindu registered all their great achievements. Hindus were children of their ancient land as they were nurtured by water flowing from her rivers and food produced by her rich soil. It was wrong to believe that India became a nation in the recent past. In fact, she had been existing as a nation since thousands of years. There might be some outward differences, but there existed basic unity in India. All Hindus were bound together by same religion, same language, and same culture. The great saga Sankara realized this principle and established his religious centers at four different corners of India. He held that all Hindus were permeated by a spirit of unity and solidarity. While discussing different elements of Hindu nationality, Golwalkar pointed out that existence of contingent territory was the first element of nationality. The second element of nationality was the characteristics of the people who inhabited that territory. The people should consider this land as a holy land and motherland. They should be united by common culture, common traditions, and common historical past and common ideals. This commonality brought them together and helped them evolve their own way of life. Third element of nationality was common economic interest of the people living in that particular territory. All these elements contributed in making the national character of our country. Thus, in Hindu nationalism of M.S. Golwalkar, cultural factors played a very important role. Thus, he laid emphasis on developing the right type of attitudes in the minds of the people by giving them proper training and education. He was of the opinion that the Hindu method of imparting right type of values and practices to the people was useful. It is only through this that the Hindu nation could evolve into national organism pulsating with the spirit of unity and oneness. Next point is territorial nationalism rejected. We have seen our previous discussion that MS Golwalkar was a supporter of the cultural nationalism, and he defined his nationalism in the light of cultural traditions of the Hindus. He rejected the concept of territorial nationalism as humbug. He held that an assortment of people having different cultures and languages could not become nation simply because they resided in a particular territory. This group of divergent people could not be called nation because it could not function as a coherent whole. It was not permeated by the living spirit of unity and oneness. It lacked the life blood and the living spring of culture. According Golwalkar, it was the cultural affinity and common historical traditions that bound the people together and made them of one mind and one body. Golwalkar was of the opinion that territorial nationalism was lifeless, unscientific, and unnatural. If we accepted the principle of territorial nationalism, then the country would get converted into dharamshala. Anybody could become a member of one nation, but this theory of nationalism was wrong because a nation was normally formed of the people who had developed common cultural affinities and who considered India as their motherland. He was of the opinion that the concept of territorial nationalism was responsible for the partition of the country and disunity in the country. It had sapped our national energy and destroyed the life spring of nationalism that nourished the national spirit of the Indian people. Territorial nationalism was unnatural and unscientific because Muslims did not consider themselves as a part of the nation. He maintained that it was this divisive and anti national agenda that resulted in the partition of the country. The partition of India was a standing example of the failure of the concept of territorial nationalism. As against this, Golwalkar's cultural nationalism was based on five principles: common religion, common race, common language, common culture, and country. These five principles generated the national consciousness in the minds of the people and made them of one mind and of one resolve. Now, the next point is Hindu nationalism and minorities. Golwalkar rejected the concept of the Indian or territorial nationalism as reality. He claimed that due to certain historical and cultural factors, Hindus in India constituted a nation and they considered India as their motherland. But as far as other religious communities in India were concerned, they did not consider India as their motherland or holy land. They took pride in the fact that they were heirs of the invaders of India. They were invaders who waged wars against Hindus to keep them in subjection. They had developed extraterritorial loyalties, though most of the converted Muslims and Christians were originally Hindus, but because of their conversion, they lost their devotion and affection for motherland. They started claiming the foreign racial genealogies as their own. Therefore, Golwalkar was of the opinion that these minorities could not be considered as a part of the Hindu nation. Golwalkar was of the opinion that the known Hindu minorities could also become a part of the Indian nation if they abandoned their separatist tendencies and accepted all the traditions as their own. He exhorted the Muslims and the Christians to join the mainstream and be a part of Hindu national tradition. He held that these communities should Indianize themselves by accepting and imbibing the Hindu cultural and historical traditions. They should consider themselves as inherited of great Hindu heroes described in the epics and take part in celebration of Hindu festivals. They should imbibe the Hindu way of life. He pointed out that it was not necessary for them to leave their religion. They should practice their religion as they wanted because they had freedom of religion and worship. Also, by accepting the Hindu way of life, they could remain Muslim and Christian. It was high time that they should return back to home and be a part of the great national tradition. Golwalkar said that he did not want to do this with the help of coercion or force, but through love and persuasion. He held that the minorities would enjoy all social and political rights, but they would not be given any privileges. Arguing further, Golwalkar pointed out that since long Hindus had developed a unique method of assimilation and absorption, which enabled the foreign elements that entered into society to get integrated into Indian society without losing their identity. The best example of this assimilation was that of Parsis who came to India from Iran to escape the religious persecution and became a part of the great Indian tradition without losing their religion and identity. Golwalkar was highly critical of the so called progressive and secular Hindus for encouraging the process of identity formation among the minorities and backward castes. They justified these divisive tendencies on the ground of secularism and democracy. Instead of promoting the process of integration in different parts of the Hindu community, they were encouraging the divisive tendencies to grow. He was of the opinion that these westernized and denationalized Hindu would not be able to forge unity of the Indian nation on the ground of pluralism and secularism. These processes were developed as a reaction and thus they would not be in a position to develop a positive content in their activities.